Hi, I'm Lucy, speech and language therapist with Talking Lab, and it's just me this week, no Silver, sorry. Nah, I'm just kidding. Of course, my super little SLT in training will be joining us later on. Thank you so much to everyone who watches, likes and shares the videos. It's so lovely to hear that there are people out there who are finding them useful. So thank you so much for the feedback. And if anyone has any requests or suggestions for future videos, I would really love to hear from you. So this week, we're talking about what to expect in terms of communication milestones for your 18-month-old child. I decided to do this video as I've seen a few families in this past month who have come to me with younger children at around 18 months old who've been a bit confused as to firstly where to go for information and advice, and secondly what is actually typical in terms of communication and language development for this age group. So some parents have said to me that they have heard that the NHS won't accept referrals for children until that child is at least 2 or 2.5, and I don't think that's entirely true. The referral system and criteria will differ between NHS trusts, but certainly where I'm based, which is in Solent NHS Trust, their referral form doesn't state that a child has to be over a particular age. So if you have concerns, then I would encourage you to get in touch with your local NHS speech and language therapy service sooner rather than later, because you are likely to end up on a waiting list. And of course, if you don't want to wait, that's absolutely fine to contact an independent SLT for an assessment. I can promise you there is no animosity or competition between NHS and independent therapists. We're all very used to sharing clients, passing referrals back and forth, sharing reports. We all started off as NHS trained therapists in this country. So really we are one big happy family. So please don't worry about that. So the guidelines around what is expected in terms of communication for an 18-month-old is quite vague and disjointed. There are various opinions and guidelines if you look online, but particularly the Red Book doesn't really have anything specific about what's expected and what to look out for. And the timings of the reviews, so the first review is when your child is between 10 and 12 months, and the second review is when they're between 2 and 2.5. So there's a very long gap there where concerns could be arising and parents don't have any clear guidelines and no one's really checking in that time. So I think there are so many of us who we're in that amazing age where the children seem to be doing new things every day, and we're probably all starting to wonder, is this normal? What should I be looking out for? My child is doing different things to someone else's child. And it's really easy to get a skewed view of what's normal, as I think for every person who says they should be doing that by now, you can find someone else with experience who says they're not expected to do that until they're older. So I'm going to put myself out there and say that I am confident that by the end of this video, you will have a much better idea of whether your 18-month-old-ish child is meeting their communication milestones and whether you should be concerned. So I'm going to give you a list of these are the things that we typically see by 18 months. There's a fairly generous section of it's okay if they're not doing these things. And then there's just a small section of we would be worried if they weren't doing these things. Does that sound good? Okay, cool. So let's get stuck in. So these are the skills that we generally see developing between a year and 18 months. So firstly, play and communication skills, which are really, really important. So we would expect children of this age to be taking an interest in other children, but not necessarily able to engage and play with them. But certainly a lot of that not very subtle staring and just trying to approach them maybe, or draw your attention to them, so pointing at them if they see other children of a similar age. We would also expect these children to be able to understand an adult's non-verbal communication. So we want them to be aware of whether you're cross or upset or in pain. Ow! And if you're pointing, then they're understanding that they should look in that direction. What's over there? Good looking. 18-month-olds should enjoy listening to songs and rhymes. Go round and round all day long. Oh, more singing. They should be beginning to play meaningfully with objects, for example, brushing their hair. What do we do with a brush? Yes. Or pretending to drink from a cup. Yes, drinking. They should also be able to act out a simple routine, for example, putting Teddy to bed. Put Doggy to bed. Cover Doggy up. Good girl. The reason that we're putting this routine in the play and social section and not in understanding is that with this example, they're not necessarily following a verbal instruction. They're playing in a way that mimics what they experience in their social world. And they would be able to do this even if they didn't understand any language. So now on to understanding. Remember, it's very normal that children's understanding of language is much, much better than their use of language, as in the words that they can say. So just like when we learn a foreign language, we start to understand words and the gist of what people are saying way before we're able to string a sentence together in, for example, French or Spanish. So at 18 months, your child should be able to understand words that are familiar and important to them. For example, people's names, animals, foods. Where's the strawberry? They should be able to select items that you name from a selection without any help. Silva, where's the spoon? You're so clever, good girl. Where's the shoe? Where's the shoe? Good girl, good listening. Where's the cup? You're so clever, good girl. There's the cup. Good girl. Where's the key? There's the key. Good listening. Where's the ball? Good girl. Good listening. Now, here's the kicker. It doesn't count if you say, get your shoes on, and your child goes to get their shoes on, because that's a routine that they're familiar with. There's not really any other options available. Or if you're pointing, they're able to follow that. So they have to be relying 100% on the words that you're saying in order to get the answer right. So you also want to be careful that you're not always asking things in the same order. For example, body parts, if you always ask, where's your head, then where's your eyes, then where's your nose, then where's your mouth, they can just get used to that routine without actually understanding the words that you're saying. So you always want to check in with their understanding by mixing up the order. They should also be able to point to some body parts on themselves. Where's your head? Yes! Where's Mummy's nose? Good girl. Where's your neck? You're so clever. Where's your tummy? There's your tummy. Where are your hands? Yeah. They should be starting to follow simple instructions, although these children may also need to rely on that situation to help them understand.
Can you give the doggy a kiss? Can you give him?
Ah. So that's the understanding part. Now, as for their expressive language, so the words that they're using themselves, we would expect children of this age to be doing a lot of pointing and vocalising and checking by looking at the adult to see that they've been understood. Down, down. Yes, a feather. 18-month-olds will often use sound to represent the names of items.
Papa.
Yes, ba, ba, ba. They should be developing a vocabulary of between 6 and 20 spoken words, although often only family and close friends understand their meaning. Up and down, 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 down.
More.
One word can cover lots of meanings. So, for example, Silva says at, which means a hat, and also anything else that goes on a head. Children will be playing with lots of sounds and noises, lots of babble, making up their own words. Copying simple phrases like oh dear and all gone. Whoops. Whoa. but we count those as one word, something like oh dear or all gone, because it's not a sentence that they've made up together out of combining the words all and gone. They're just copying it as a single chunk that they've learnt from hearing it. So in terms of speech sounds, so that's the sounds within the words, like the B sound. We're not expecting very much at all in this area. At 18 months, their speech is only expected to be understood by familiar adults. Any word attempts are very simplified, lots of sounds missing, for example, m for more or at for hat. The main speech sounds used are the sounds that we make at the front of the mouth, so m, p, b, w, t, d, n. Interesting fact for you, children are extremely visual learners and they learn how to make sounds according to what they see the adult doing. So they can figure out how you're making what we call front sounds because they can see what you're doing with your mouth and with your tongue. Harder sounds like k and g are made at the back of the mouth and are therefore harder for children to see, and they develop these sounds later. So it's really important to be face-to-face with your child when you're talking so that they get a really clear view of what's going on and how you're making those sounds. So in terms of the children that we would be worried about and whose parents should consider contacting a speech and language therapist is if your child was doing any of the following things. So if your child was not able to identify any objects that you name, so if they couldn't point to the dog or select an object out of a group of items, that would be quite worrying. If your child was not making a range of different sounds and noises, so if they weren't doing that exploring and playing with sounds and verbalizations, so we're not particularly worried if they're not using any recognisable words at all at this age, especially if they have good understanding. I wouldn't be worried at all. If your child was not babbling or vocalising, and especially if they had previously been babbling and now they're no longer babbling, that would be very concerning because I would be worried that maybe they were having hearing difficulties or something else was going on like autism. Similarly, we would be very concerned if your child was reluctant to make eye contact with familiar adults or if they didn't turn their head or look towards where you were pointing, because that could indicate an impairment in social understanding, which again could be in line with signs of autism. So that's it basically. So 18 months, if your child was not able to do one of those 4 things, I would say definitely get in touch with a speech and language therapist. And if you're unsure about any of the other skills, it never hurts to arrange an assessment, even if it's just to put your mind at ease. So I hope that's given a bit of clarity around what to expect in terms of communication at 18 months old. Hopefully that's made some people feel better about your child's skills, but if you're now starting to worry, then do just send me a message and we can have a chat. It's much better and easier to get the ball rolling earlier on rather than just worrying and taking a wait and see approach. So please remember to like my Facebook page, so facebook.com/talkinglab. We are planning a live event once we reach 200 likes, and we're really close. I think we're on about 192. So please, please, please give us a like. Thank you, stay safe, and bye for now.